thank you all for your interest in my work. I've never actually done a presentation of this form before, and obviously we're all doing everything via Zoom these days, so it's a new thing for me to just work like this with the audience, and my daughter is fantastic, so without her I wouldn't actually be able to do it. So, so I'm just going to start off with work from the mid-90s. I had been working as an artist after I did a degree in graphic design originally, and took some courses at the Slade School of Art. I started painting in the mid to late 80s really, but it took me a few years to get going and to call anything that I would have done art. So I'm going to start with a piece from around the mid to late 90s. So I'll start off now, and if any of you have any questions throughout at any point, please do, because it's actually better for me if I have to respond to questions rather than just waffling on, because I lose the train of my thought. So this is quite a large painting from, I think it's probably the second exhibition I did at Taylor Gallery. So I think it would be the late 90s maybe, or mid to late 90s. And it was called The Milky Way is Always Clearly Visible. And it was a series of paintings to do with the sky. And obviously the moon there, as we can see, and basically what I could see from my window at night, which was clouds passing over the moon. So that's the type of painting I was doing then. I was learning to paint really, and I used quite thick paint, quite textural paint as well as light paint, but pretty textural type paint. So I'm going to move on now. These are the type of landscape drawings I was doing at the time as well. I used to drive out around the countryside here in Thomastown and bring a spray can of water and some chalks and charcoals. And I did, I probably did hundreds of these type of landscape drawings with the water and chalk. Quite quick sketches because my oldest daughter was a baby at the time, so I didn't have that much time to linger. So that led on to these type of paintings, which again, I did a whole series of landscape paintings, but with water in the landscape. For ages, I was making these drawings of fields and sort of field markings around the area. And I had a hankering all the time that I wanted to paint, I wanted to make paintings of fields, but I really didn't feel I could. I just had no sort of interest in making paintings of fields just for the sake of it. So I started seeing pools of water. I think there's ice actually on this one as well. Pools of water in fields and field markings in the form of human intervention, you could say, with the tractor marks. So the fact that there was water lodged in the fields, that was what actually got me into making paintings about the fields. Because I suppose the way I view landscape is that for me, there has to be something happening within the landscape that changes it. Otherwise, I don't find it that interesting. So it was the water that brought me into the fields, so to speak. So I was working with the four elements, you could say, really, air, fire, and intending to get to water, bringing little bits of water in. And there was a series of burnings just at the back of my house. Sorry? No, that's okay. So it again was like an intervention in the landscape. So I made a whole series of these burning paintings, which there was a lot of smoke in a lot of them, and again changed the nature of the landscape that I was looking at.
You can see your time there.
Okay, right. So I had been doing drawings previous to these based on the river. And again, they were kind of river landscapes. And I grew up beside the river in Carrick-on-Suir, literally on the river. Like when we walked out the door, there was the river. And it's the same where I live here in Thomastown. I look out the window on the River Nore here. And so I made a lot of drawings about the river bank, the river, but somehow I didn't see them as that exciting. And it was only when the river started to flood that I became really interested, because again, it was that dramatic change in the landscape. Here was something, a phenomena, a weather phenomena, causing a dramatic change in the landscape. So that's what made it interesting for me. This drawing wouldn't be that big. It's probably about A2. So this was one of my first flooded field paintings. And it's quite big, it's about 4 foot. And as you can see, it's quite textured. I was still using textured paint at this stage. And it was actually taken by my husband at the time because he took a flying lesson, and I asked him while he was up there to take photographs for me, so he did. So this, from those paintings that you saw there, I was invited to go to the Ballinglen Arts Foundation in North Mayo. And I actually didn't really want to go initially because I didn't see, I couldn't see what I'd do there. And I felt that I have to have a connection, or I feel that I need to have a connection to a place in order to make work about it. So I remember then that I had been there at the Cage of Fields maybe 5 years previously. And I remembered how struck I was by being in that landscape that we were told was actually 5,000 years old. And because of the excavation at the Cage of Fields, you could see evidence of that amount of time in the landscape. So I felt it was a really profound connection to our ancestry. And even though I don't come from North Mayo, I felt a real deep connection to the land of this country. So that was what made me decide to go there. So I started off making a series of drawings again about the peat, not the peat so much, but the bog cotton that grew in the peat, because it was the only thing that moved. And a lot of my interest is in landscape elements or objects that actually move or are transient. So I made a lot of work about bog cotton, which we'll see in the next one. And this is a painting about gorse, because the landscape was filled with this vivid yellow gorse at one of the times I was there. So I did a whole series of these paintings, some of them quite big, and did, I think, one touring exhibition and then another exhibition as well. So this is one of the bog cotton paintings, which tend to grow in the cracks around the very black peat. And also the soil was very sort of cloying and thick. So again, I used thick paint. And these are, both of those paintings are quite big, around 4 foot by 5. And this brings me on, yeah, this was a small, just a small painting, again, based on when you looked down into the soil, this is the type of thing you saw, these black shapes. So from Mayo, from North Mayo, I found myself in Donegal. I went up there actually to be part of an exhibition in a gallery that no longer exists called the Cavanagh Gallery, run by the O'Kane family in Lifford, County Donegal. And while I was there, I went over to the West to visit friends of mine. And that was, I think about 2002 or 3, and I've actually been going to Donegal very regularly since. And so I began to make work while I was in Donegal and made a series of paintings to do with the land and the sea while I was there. Sorry, this is not a great photograph of this now, but again, this is quite a big painting, 4 foot by 5. So, am I going too quickly or too slowly, or am I okay?
Fine. Yeah. Yeah, it's very good.
Okay. Thank
You're
you.
going fine. Just a question.
Sure.
When you're doing your landscapes, are you painting in situ, in plein air, or do you take reference and go back to somewhere sheltered to paint
Oh,
it?
yeah. No. When I did the drawings when I was in North Mayo, I did them physically in situ.
Okay.
They were almost like, we'll say, a record. You know, it was like documentary drawing, really, just to gather information. But I always make the paintings in the studio because I just couldn't do it in the landscape, and it doesn't hold any interest for me to paint in the landscape. You know. So I take a lot of photographs and I bring them back to the studio.
All right. So the color reference would come from your sketches and your photographs.
Yeah, exactly. The photographs mainly, and some from the drawings. But the drawings really are, I see the drawings as in a way separate. You know, they're not for the paintings, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask you as well, Bernadette? I know I've read when I'm looking up, I've read in your some of your statements about your work, and in one of your exhibitions, you often embed things in the paint, like you said you'd started it with on a wall with your sister. I think it was mentioned in one of the exhibitions in the Taylor Gallery that, you know, where they used to embed horsehair in the plaster in the walls.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was a long time ago. Yes, I went through that phase of experimenting with different materials, and to see how it was to do with the subject matter. As it, I suppose the way I use paint is to do with the subject matter. So the field paintings I was making with the water in them. And then the burnings, I only showed you one fire, but I made a series of burnings in a field as well called Marina's Field. And because the fields were full of straw, I thought, rather than, which I just couldn't do because I'd find it too boring, paint every little, make it look like straw, I actually saw a piece of rope in the studio one day and thought if I was to cut that into it, it might give that sort of textural quality that I was after. So that's how I began doing that. And I did remember then that actually there was horsehair in the walls in the house that we grew up in Carrick-on-Shore. And I remember thinking about that the horsehair was obviously added to the cement to give it a kind of texture and density and to hold the whole thing together, really. So that's how I started to do that. But I did it specifically because those were fields of straw, and I was trying to kind of achieve some sort of quality of that type of texture. okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So I'll move further on then from this one. Okay. So I then found myself in Kilrealik. If any of you've ever been there on, where is it again? Ballinskelligs. Very far west, and at the artist retreat there. And I didn't want to do landscape or make work about the sea or anything, because I had already done a whole series of sea paintings to do with Donegal, and also an area in the south of Ireland, which I don't actually have any photographs of at the moment. So I found Kilrealik very oppressive in a way, because it has a big high cliff on one side where the cottages are. So and most people, I think, tend to look towards the sea. So I found myself out walking, and what I saw when I was walking, as there was a mist down, was the lichen on the walls really stood out. It was like the lichen was sort of glowing. So that was something that interested me. So when I came back to Thomastown, I started to explore lichen on the walls and look into it, because again, it's a similar, how would you say, it's a similar phenomenon in a way to the bog cotton, something that grows at such a tiny, imperceptible rate, but yet it's a growth, and it's growing. So that was what interested me about it. So I ended up doing a whole series of lichen paintings, which I've only exhibited one or maybe two of them. And I'm waiting for an opportunity at some point to include them in an exhibition. And it's quite big. This one was on show at the RHA Gallery annual exhibition. I think it was not last year, maybe the year before. So now what have we got? So what year are we now? After 2004, maybe 6, 7-ish, this is from Thomastown, where I live beside the river, and I still wanted to make work about the river. So I set myself a task of observing the river from the house and studio here, which is a very good vantage point overlooking the River Nore, from I think maybe about 80 foot. So I actually ended up spending about 3 or 4 years doing it. So these are some of the small paintings that I started doing around that time. And as I said, it did take me a few years to kind of complete that aspect of a project, so to speak. So this is a bigger painting, and it's one of the first flood paintings I made. Again, it's probably about 3.5 by 4 or 5. And it's literally looking out my front door, where the water had risen up from the ground, and the river is very high behind it, and the reflections of trees were visible in the water, which gave it more, I suppose, visual interest, that you can see the reflection of the trees in the water. Again, this was one of the those flood paintings, which I ended up doing a lot of as well, about 4 foot again. And I can see the paint is getting thinner now, because I was trying to now, as opposed to looking at very heavy ground or heavy landscape, I was trying to get the sense of flowing water, and very fast flowing as well, because it is actually a very volatile river outside and the water flows very quickly. So I had to do something to make the water look like water as opposed to land. That didn't work. Try again. Okay. So following on, or maybe around the same time, or still on the idea of wanting to make work that is about landscape, but it isn't just landscape. So to do with what the weather and effects that happen within the landscape due to the landscape. And so a lot to do with weather effects, climate, movement. These are some drawings. The one on the right is to do with fog, trees and fog, and these are all things that I would see as I looked at the riverbank. So I mean, you'd see everything, all the weather that is thrown at us. The middle one was snow, I think, and the left one again was probably mist or fog. These are charcoal on canvas, and I use water as well, sprayed from one of those spray bottles, to just usually on the floor. Well, I'd have to use it on the floor mostly, to disperse the charcoal and to give the drawings a kind of when you're looking at say fog or mist, what you're looking at, well, is water. It's all to do with water. You can't see what you're looking at, so you're just looking at shapes really, and the mist or fog, it just makes it all very hazy. So I really like that idea that you can't actually see what you're looking at, because that's the nature of perception anyway. We all see things differently. So perception is a big interest of mine, and our vision and peripheral vision as well, what we see while we're looking at something, what's actually going on around us. So I suppose a lot of the work for me, the interest lies in what's happening to the landscape around what I'm doing, or what I'm trying to capture, we'll say. Was this one of the first? Yeah, this again is a canvas the size of the ones you've seen already, which is 5 foot by 7, and it's a drawing of a small tree that has now grown a lot bigger, and it's from a very frosty, misty morning that I took photographs of the tree like this and decided to make the drawing.
Beautiful.
Can I just ask you, how did you get that foggy effect?
Oh God.
I know that's a big question, sorry.
It is. I used charcoal. You know those big thick sticks of charcoal? I have a massive big box of those. And ordinary chalk, school chalk, children's school chalk. And also you can buy these really big white chalks that I bought in, I don't know where I got them, but I have a big carton of big thick chalks. Now they're quite hard, so I go through an awful lot of them. This would have taken me maybe 2 weeks or more even to complete. That would be all day, every day.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a bit of a task. You end up taking off more than you put on.
Yeah.
You know, first, obviously, you get it down, then over it and over it. So I would end up often just rubbing it all off very lightly, and also with the paintbrush. I think I did it with a thick paintbrush. So you're kind of dabbing really lightly. So you're taking off the charcoal and you're taking off the chalk. And in fact, there was mounds of chalk left at the bottom of the canvas and all over my feet and everything. So there's an awful lot of chalk and charcoal gone into it, even though it looks maybe as if there isn't, you know.
Thank you
It's
very
very
much,
beautiful.
Bernadette. Thank you.
Is it on canvas, Bernadette?
Yes, yeah. All those big drawings are
They're
on
very
canvas.
beautiful.
Thank you.
And would you have sprayed that then with water?
Oh yeah, I mean, 5 tins maybe. You know, you'd have to spray an awful lot to make sure that it wouldn't move. And I think I would have sprayed while I was drawing it as well. At certain stages, spray it so that that's fixed, then do more, spray that, and then do more, you know.
But your canvas must be a very fine canvas, is it?
Well, yeah, I suppose. I wouldn't think it's very fine, but it's not porous and it's not linen.
Okay.
You know, it is quite fine. Yeah, I like a smooth surface.
Surface, yeah.
I don't like heavily textured canvases. I
Mhm.
tend to get and the reason I did them on canvas was I wanted to make them big. I actually started making the gentleman who spoke to me a little while ago. I just remembered that I did actually make one big drawing in Donegal on a canvas. It was 4 foot by 5, and I had it in the back of. I had a kind of caravan, and I did set it up in a certain location in Donegal and started drawing on that canvas. And that was the first one that got me into drawing on canvas. And the reason was because you couldn't draw on paper in an area like that. The wind would just blow it away.
Oh, yeah.
And also, drawing on canvas allows you to physically move it around and not have to frame it. And that's a big concern. Like the practicalities, as everybody knows, are often are what direct you what to do. Because I do remember having a very big drawing in an exhibition after I just started out, I think the late 80s, in the Butler Gallery. And it was in a big frame that I had made, and it actually fell off the wall. And I thought that could have actually nearly killed someone because it was so heavy and so big, you know. So I needed something light that I could physically move myself. And that's in a way what got me into drawing on the canvases.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Where are we going now? Better speed up a bit. So I think this one and maybe a couple after this are from an exhibition I did from that project that I set myself almost 4 years of making work related to the river outside the door. So all of these are related to the river outside the door. The drawings and the paintings. And they're all aspects of weather effects, close-ups, distance, river, flooding, and those are all small drawings of aspects of the river. So that one's that's 5 foot by 7 as well. This was part of the Kilkenny Arts Festival one year. I can't see that there, but these are basically what I see when I look out the top window of the house, or what I did see then. And they're all the same size, which is, I think it's 103 by 113 or something is the size I was using. There's some of the small ones that you saw earlier. And fog. Okay, so we move to something, I won't say different, but different physical working space. It was great. I was offered a residency at the RHA studios in, when was that? 2015. And so this is where this is from. So because of all the big work I had done up to this point, the huge big canvases and big paintings and everything, I decided I was just going to make small drawings. And I think I had been to Ballinglen Arts Foundation before this as well, on yet another visit. And so I decided I would just set myself up on a table. I wasn't going to have to physically move around. Plus I had broken my arm previous to that, and I just needed to work on the flat. So I did a lot of drawings based on imagery that I had collected over the years from Mayo and maybe here, or traveling, and imagery that I almost saw it like a sort of threads of interests, and I had an idea that I would like to pull these threads together somehow. So I don't know if I did that, but it was good drawing, making the small drawings. Some of them are on tracing paper. Some of them are layered over each other. So in a way, it was a period of experimentation, which was brilliant, because that's the way I sort of saw the RHA studios, as a place to explore and experiment and see what I could do differently. So when I came back from the RHA, which was January, this had happened outside the front door. So I don't know if any of you remember this, when she was the Minister for what, the Environment or something at the time, Joan Burton. And there was the biggest flood that we had experienced in Ireland, actually, or well, since 1947, apparently. Throughout the whole country, you probably remember it, there was horrific tales of flooding all throughout the country, and it went on for weeks, didn't it? Mm. And this literally happened outside the front door here, and it was all over the papers, and poor Joan got an awful ribbing, and there was sharks put in beside her and everything on social media. You probably remember that. So because it was so dramatic and unexpected, I decided to make a painting out of it. And because, as well as that, after that, she was Labour, wasn't she? Yeah.
Yeah.
The Labour government fall. So it seemed to coincide quite well with poor Joan's fall out of the boat, which, I mean, I felt terrible for her, and she was great about it, but it's kind of a slight anomaly, really, and I don't normally have people in paintings, but it was an opportunity to do it. So my record of that event. So because of that very big flooding, and because I had been doing a lot of work myself to do with flooding and the river, and I saw myself continuing, I started to make more work related to flooding. And around that time as well, people were becoming much more aware of climate change and environmental change, and there was more flooding, widespread flooding. There was a lot of talk of flooding and wildfires actually throughout the world. So it became very apparent that climate change definitely was being recognized as a thing. So I happened to be going from Dublin to Galway on the train around that time, and it was actually before that massive flood, but the whole Shannon River was flooded, heavily flooded before the flood. So it must have been pretty, even way worse when it actually did flood. But I took photographs the whole way across, and I ended up making these 3 paintings, which this is one of them, more of a close-up. And they're all about the same size as the other ones. And I tried here as well, because at the time of year we went over to Galway that time. It was November, was it? It was November, and everything was sort of grey and hazy, and all you saw really was just little bits of green kind of glowing out of the water, but the whole atmosphere was one of heavy grey, damp weather. So and also I had an idea around this time as well, as to try and somehow marry the idea of using charcoal and paint, or kind of bring the drawing more into the painting. Maybe it was like that already, I don't know, but I sort of imagined that I was maybe using charcoal while I was using paint, if that makes any sense. It doesn't really, now that I say it, but that was what I was trying to do. So it led me on to making a series of paintings related to that flood. What's the name of the exhibition? Oh yeah. So this is the playground. This is called No Fun Today. 70 by 100 centimeters canvas.
Can I ask you a question there, Bernadette?
Sure. Do you want to? Can we go back to that? Yeah.
Let's just ask you: are you using lighter? You know, you're clearly not using thick paint anymore.
No.
You diluted it more and more as you went along in your practice.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's to do with the subject matter. So the thick paint was related to thick, heavy, cloying soil, you know, and fields, and so the thin paint is to do with water. So what I'm trying to achieve really is the effect of what I'm looking at, you know, a feeling of it, as well as a visual image of it.
So you would just dilute your oils down with white spirit or something like that, or?
Yeah, very much. I do a lot of pouring as well of white spirit, what you would call coloured white spirit. I don't know if I did it in this. I probably did, yeah. That yellowish section there is probably poured.
Oh, wow, fantastic.
Pardon?
It's fantastic.
Thank you. And that just brings me back to what Paula mentioned earlier about the textures and actually mixing pieces, or mixing other kind of objects in with the paint. And again, it's to, in a way, try and achieve something, or do something with something that will interrupt the painting and will give me something that I can't control myself. So I should have said that then, but that, when I mentioned that rope, cutting the rope into the paint, I also used charcoal, where I shaved charcoal into it so that it would build up this kind of dense. Now I haven't got all the paintings here because it would be way too long, but I built up a kind of dense layer of blackness with the charcoal that you just can't really get with just paint. So bringing me along here is when I was started to make those sky paintings, actually, that I mentioned earlier. Some of the time when I look at the sky, I did make a lot of drawings of the movement of clouds in the sky, but also a lot of the time it was very hazy. And I found it difficult to create that kind of hazy feeling then. And I thought, well, how could I make it look sort of transparent, where you're looking through something? Because when you look at the sky, you're looking through something all the time. It's water vapor. So I started to pour, at the time, I started to pour wax on canvas, very thin wax, and it did actually work. It did give that transparent feeling, but ultimately I didn't think it was too stable. I was nervous that it would crack. So that led me to pouring water and pouring oil, not oil, but white spirit. So it was probably around that then that I started doing that. And it's purely to shift what I have on the canvas and do something to it that I can't do myself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So this brings me to this exhibition which was in the Solstice Art Centre in Navan, and that's the title of it. And you'll see quite a number of the large drawings were in it. And in a way, it was, I suppose the title is from, in a way, anything can happen when you're looking at landscape or life. Flooding can come, completely wash out the landscape, and lives can be lost and everything. But these are just some of the drawings. It's a lovely gallery space.
They charcoal, Bernadette?
Yeah, those are all charcoal. Slight bit of pastel as well on this one. There's a little green section.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's all right. Did I go back? Yeah. Yeah, they're the charcoal and chalk that I mentioned earlier.
Beautiful.
I think those are 6 foot square, 6 foot by 7. So this leads me on to another exhibition which included a lot of the work I was doing then to do with flooding, which came from the paintings that I just showed you. And this was in the Lewin Gallery in Athlone, which is literally on the banks of the Shannon. And this was called So Much Water, So Close to Home, which was based on a short story by Raymond Carver, the writer, which I felt was very suitable to what I was doing, and also the fact that the Lewin Gallery is situated literally on the Shannon River. So that's those. And those are another, there was 2 9s to get, so what's 2 9? 18 paintings. And in this exhibition, or well, the work previous, I had started to expand the idea of paintings or making images to do with flooding just on the River Nore to other rivers where I grew up in Carrick-on-Shore, and also places outside of Ireland and the country, or parts of Ireland. For example, that one on the right there is called Welcome to Clare Galway, because I happened to be in Clare Galway when there was a huge big flood, and there was a big sign saying Welcome to Clare Galway, but you couldn't really get very far there. So these were kind of an expansion of what I had been doing. So let's go to, yeah, there's a couple of them, and this is from an image that I would have seen maybe. Obviously, I saw a lot of images on the internet, and these are images. These are from images that I would have seen of flooding in places that I would have maybe looked at previously or something. And I like the idea of the railway track being flooded, which halted any movement or transport or basically going anywhere, like now, really. This is from an area not too far away where the idea of buildings being reflected in, and that's like a farm building. So there would be a lot of activity in a building like that normally, and obviously there wasn't much going on. This is from a section of the River Shore in Carrick-on-Shore, where I come from. And I in a way, this is slightly off the track of the other paintings, in that my mother had died and I happened to be down there, and I saw this little small, quite fragile looking boat, and I thought of it as a kind of a little harbour. I always thought of Carrick-on-Shore as a harbour, a kind of safe harbour you could go to, because my mother and father were always there, always where I had grown up. So I think I called this No Safe Harbour. This is from looking out here in Thomastown, looking out the window upstairs, the most top window, and looking out on a kind of a very foggy, quite flooded river. And these are bigger ones again, they're like 4 foot, 4.5. This leads me to another exhibition, which was in the Source Art Centre in Thurles, not last year, the year before, I think, which included a lot of the paintings related to flooding. And also I had included some work related to burnings, large burnings, kind of going back to what I had done earlier. And also we became very aware of them because my brother lives in California and lives very close to an area where they had, I think it was called the Stubbs Fire. And they were surrounded by smoke and you know, these kind of disaster areas. And there was a town called Paradise, which was literally burned to the ground. So I made work related to that. There's Amelia. So the bottom painting, or the bottom drawing there in the middle, is from one of the series that I had done, that I showed you earlier, which is a snow in the landscape, a snow in the river landscape. And the top one on the right here is called The Colour of Anxiety. The middle one, I think it's called It Could Be Graignamanagh. The bottom one is from looking out here from this house. And the top one is an image I took from an image of devastation of, we don't actually know particularly what. It could be a fire, it could be a flood. I still don't know, but it was an image that really struck me. And again, it gave me an opportunity to bring a figure into the landscape. Excuse me. I might have done this later, or it was around that time anyway. And this was taken from, excuse me, taken from an image that I saw of the railway tracks actually in Carrick-on-Shore, or going towards Waterford from Carrick, where I would have gone often myself as a teenager. And it's called No Train Coming, Flood on the Tracks, which if you're a fan of Bob Dylan, you'll recognize the references from No Train Coming, Blood on the Tracks, yes. And so that's that. And that was actually in the RHA exhibition this year, which none of us got to see. Well, some of you might have gotten to see it actually, if you're living in Dublin, but I didn't see it. So this is a large painting again, 6 foot by 7, and it's related to kind of burnings that we were experiencing virtually throughout the world at a very rapid rate there for a good while. And it's called Somewhere We Know. This is it's kind of abrupt from that movement to here, but while all that large work was going on, As I mentioned there a little while ago, my mother had died, and I found myself making a lot of work related to Carrick on Shore and to, I suppose, imagery that I just found myself drawn to. So after about 4 years, I decided to do an exhibition about it. I was actually invited to do an exhibition by a lady called Anya van Gosselin, who was a curator and had a gallery in Wexford. And the gallery was quite small, and so there wasn't enough room to put those large canvases. So I actually came up with the idea of doing an exhibition, and I wanted to do something related to my mother's death, even though I actually didn't know I wanted to do it until I started doing it. This is an image of the house that I grew up in for the most part of my life, where my mother ran a guest house that's now totally derelict. So these are some of the paintings from that exhibition. It toured around to 3 different venues and ended up at the South Tipperary Art Centre in Clonmel. So as you can see, there's different imagery there, and some of them relate to Carrick on Shore. And I worked with the top middle one there is based on an old postcard of the river shore. So I tried to make it look like as much like an old postcard as I could. The other ones. Sorry.
May I ask?
Sure.
Do you still use charcoal in some of your paintings? They have a sort of a drawing.
Yeah. No, I don't use charcoal with paint. I don't use charcoal and oil paint together on the same canvas.
Okay.
So the bottom right one is oil paint.
Okay.
And this one here is oil paint. Sorry, do I have to tap it?
No, just
the top middle one is oil paint. And the other 3 are actually drawings.
So they're charcoal drawings?
Yeah, they're charcoal, chalk, and there's a little bit of probably acrylic, maybe acrylic or watercolor. I'm not sure. So the one on the bottom left, it's an image of the castle, and it would be using dark red pastel Conte, some very thin, some quite thick, and also the water that I mentioned, that I tend to either pour water on it or I use these spray, you know. So I think the bottom middle one is, and these are all related to my mother specifically, and to things about my mother and things that she liked. So the bottom one is actually a drawing from Monet in his garden, and I use charcoal, chalk, and then just very thin acrylic paint, or maybe watercolor, I'm not sure, to just get a large brush and just bring it right down in front of it, almost like it was curtains and that we were looking through something. So that was a kind of a feeling that I wanted to achieve, in a way, that you were looking at something that was quite distant, to do with my mother's death. And the top right one was obviously from an old picture of the church. So I'll move on now quickly because I can see that the time is, yeah, and I'm talking too much. This brings me up to more recent time, which is an exhibition that I did in May of last year at Taylor Galleries. And it was mainly virtual in the beginning because of the lockdown, and then it opened for a while. So these are some of the images, and this particular painting is based on the flooding on the quayside in Carrick on Shore, which was where I grew up, just right there. So yeah. These are some of the paintings that were in that exhibition. Bringing the flooding and the burnings in a way more to the fore. And while the lockdown was on, the first lockdown, we all found ourselves not being able to do anything other than we would normally do or go anywhere. So I normally I tend to walk a lot in the morning and in the evening. So while I was walking at night, I began to take photographs and imagined all the people inside houses that well, basically that couldn't really go out or do anything. So the feeling of restriction and constraint on us all was very palpable, in a way a lot more palpable than it is now probably, or else maybe we'd just gotten used to it. So anyway, I took a lot of photographs and I decided to make just small paintings based on windows and paths, the street, and what I could see when I was out walking, and literally on my own, because there would be nobody else in the whole town. So it was great. I was able to stand out in the middle of the street and everything and take photographs with no traffic. And these were part of that exhibition called, what was it called? One touch of nature makes the whole world kin, which was a line I took from a Shakespearean play that I felt not particularly, it wasn't specifically related to the lockdown, but it was related to what flooding, burnings and everything does to the world. So these, yeah, this is another painting from that series where I used to pass by the car park every night, and there had been a building going on which came to a standstill like everything else. So this painting is based on that. So now let's see what's next. Oh yeah, these are just a couple of close-ups of the windows. This again a figure, and it reminded me of an area near, in fact it's based on an area near where my mother used to live, and just the hardship involved for people who, you know, were just living with flooding. It all looks very beautiful and everything, but the other side of it is the complete opposite. So looking in. This just is, we're just getting to the end here now, so I just wanted to include this because the poet Derek Mahan died last year, and I had done drawings to, I suppose, accompany this book that he had done in, I don't know, I can't remember when it was, 2016 maybe, called Somewhere the Wave. So they asked me if I would do some drawings for it, so I included it. And they were based, I happened to be in Donegal at the time, so they were based from there. That's one of his poems. So that just brings me right up to work that I've been doing now. And the opposite to the windows, where I was looking in, or at least looking in from a distance, some semblance of looking in. These are to do with looking out, because we're locked in. Well, I suppose these are more metaphorically, because we can physically still go out, but it's the idea of looking out. So this is what I'm trying to do with these. So I'm inside and I'm looking out, and I'm looking through something that's blocking my vision, so to speak, because I can't go any further. Is that? That's the last one.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Oh yeah, no, one more. This is just a page from my website. And so if anybody is interested, you could maybe look it up if you want. So that's it. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you.